polka, that's for me. Living life so merrily. It's so easy, can't you see? Polka, polka, that's for me. Polka, polka, everyone come along, it's lots of fun.
Welcome back. Miguel Dorati here at the Talk and Shoot podcast. And this Talk and Shoot podcast, we're going to hit on the state of MMA. And I got my trusty sidekick, Mike Davis, here with me. Mike, how you doing?
Good, man. All the way from Chicago. Enjoying this weather finally.
I know you got the UFC in the neighborhood this weekend, so we'll get into that. I know you got a couple other subjects that you want to talk about, the state of MMA in general. So the UFC's in town. What's going on in Chicago? What can you tell us?
You know, it doesn't have the hype that past UFCs have had. Maybe it's because of the summer. There's a ton of competition going on in regards to like street fests and concerts and stuff. But Dillashaw Barao is a solid main event. That is a legitimate world title fight that anyone in their right mind would want to see. So I mean, like they're doing the press conferences and stuff like that. My social media is pretty much based on people involved in the mixed martial arts scene due to the fact that I'm a promoter up here. But it's not getting as much hype as it used to in the past, unfortunately. Because anytime a big show comes to town, I like to see them.
Yeah, let's take a closer look at this. What are they popping you for tickets?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at StubHub right now. You're paying at least $100, but when they first go on sale, they were like about $200 a piece for the cheap seats. Okay. I just looked recently, so it's about $100 a seat, for all the way up in the nosebleeds. I still think that's a little pricey, in my opinion.
Okay. I mean, you assume it's the big show and it's a special show and stuff. It's live on Fox Sports, or Fox rather, not Fox Sports. It's on Fox, the big channel kind of thing. I agree with you. Dillashaw Barao is a good main event, a very good main event with a lot of tie-ins here. So let's break that one down for a little bit, and then we can go through the rest of the card and skip around here. You got Dillashaw. Dillashaw won the belt last May 2014. He's defended the belt once, and that was supposed to be in August of last year in a rematch with Barao, and Barao fell apart at the weigh-ins, didn't make weight, and they slipped Joe Soto in from the undercard into the title fight there at the last minute.
Who did well.
And now that's the open question on this, because at the end of the day, I think Dillashaw now has had the belt over a year. He's defended it once against Joe Soto, who everybody on that fight deserves credit. You know what I mean? Because a fight under those circumstances, there's a lot of reasons to say, nah, I don't want to do it. And everybody signed up. But, is Joe Soto a title? I don't know if Joe Soto had 6 or 8 fights in the UFC that he'd worked.
But that was his UFC debut.
Yeah, no, I know. But say he had 6 or 8 fights, is he the type of fighter who would have already worked his way up the rankings and be in the title picture? I think he's a notch below, and I'm not putting him down. I think he's a hell of a gritty fighter. But, there's a championship level, and I'm not sure Joe Soto is that level.
I agree with you, however.
And what that does is that Dillashaw did work into the 5th round to finish him. And that's really the only performance we've got to judge Dillashaw on since he's held the belt. So Dillashaw right now is almost a 2-1 favorite over Barao. And I kind of question that, because Barao obviously was a big favorite going into the first fight. If you look at Barao's record, I mean, he won the belt. He was interim champion for a while, and he'd been through a lot, and he defended the belt. He actually lost his first MMA fight, then won something like 30-something in a row.
Yeah,
before
he went on a crazy run. Before
losing to Dillashaw again, and you kind of think, okay, so Dillashaw is his loss now. Is this guy ready to drop 2 of 3? I don't know. The kid has been a winner. What it also does bring in up is his condition, Renan Barao's condition. He did make the have a comeback fight after failing to make weight and having his rematch with Dillashaw fall apart. He came back. He took out Mitch Gagnon. Did his job basically back in December. This fight was supposed to go on earlier in the year, and Dillashaw got hurt. So now we're here in near the end of July, and we've got Barao back. During all this time, Barao's team, the Novo União team down in Brazil, has had a lot of drama with Aldo, having a visit for drug testing, and there was a lot of confusion around that made the news, and then ultimately Aldo getting hurt and pulling out of the biggest fight in UFC history, which was his match with Conor McGregor. So
no, let me rewind. Prior to that, when they announced McGregor versus, when they announced Aldo, would you have guessed it would have been the biggest fight in UFC history? I would not have.
We're digressing here a little bit, but yeah, we can talk about that too, because, the thing is that McGregor has something. I don't want to try.
Ali effect.
Yeah, I don't want to try and describe it because I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there's some stuff that you cannot bottle, And part of what he brings is the attention, is like the ethnic, everyone in Ireland knows who the guy is. And, I mean, now you're at the point where the guy actually moves an economy a little bit. I think some of the betting that comes in on him is maybe skewed because of the backing he receives from the Irish community, Fighting and boxing has always been very ethnic, and, McGregor is able to capture that here, MMA hasn't known what to do with those types of factors really well. We've had...
Well, they haven't really had them yet. They've tried to manufacture them, like with Cain Velasquez, who Mexican, but, the Mexicans in Mexico don't really accept him.
Yeah, no, I mean...
So they've never really had that dynamic either outside of Brazilians.
Yeah, you've got Brazilians, but they're a dime a dozen, especially, even good ones. So there's that a lot. They've had Russian fighters, but they always ask dumb questions like, well, how can you have a Russian fight a Russian? But, I mean, when you got Uriah Faber fighting Eddie Wineland, you got American versus American. Who cares, No one cares. They don't know how to handle it. There was a lot in the early days of the USA versus Russia, USA versus the world, and that marketing is kind of stale. It doesn't pick up. But McGregor transcended that and broke through and became an icon that way. And I think the UFC recognized that early. So yeah, before the fight or when it was announced back at the beginning of the year, you were going to take a wait and see. But there were a few things that told you, early on, I think that it was going to be big. First was the UFC's commitment to the fight, of doing the Grand World Tour and stuff like that. And they themselves have said that they've never spent more money promoting a fight. And that's a big commitment on their part. And I got to be honest with you, it's at that point that McGregor started to get my attention a little bit more. And, I think this goes across the board, and this carries through to actually beating Mendez and continuing to do that, is the guy carried himself really well. First he comes across as a little bit of a punk, and, a lot of the people, it's one of the cliches that always happens in the business. What has he done? He hasn't done anything. He hasn't beaten anybody. And, people who put in their dues, so to speak, sometimes knock the guy, and you get into that. But he overcame all of that. He actually conducted himself really well in terms of getting the attention, backing it up, doing the talking, and after that, walking the walk. So, yes, at some point, McGregor started to become the real deal in my book during that process. And here's the thing is...
Would you have guessed it would have been the biggest event in the UFC history?
The way they marketed it, look, they don't put money into something without getting their money back out. When they dumped a lot of money into it, and who knows what the TV deal is in Ireland, and, if Ireland, they were on regular TV, and then they got a pay-per-view for that one, and they're taking in a little bit of money there. I don't know what the aspects of the deal is, but it also tells me another interesting thing is they're insisting that Aldo and McGregor, when it does happen, is going to happen in Vegas, and instead of Ireland. And I think that's just going to come down to where they can pull in the most money. When you put a main event fight in Las Vegas, I think the UFC is at their maximum ability to monetize that fight. So they put into it more than they ever have. I do believe that they expected to get out of it more than they ever have. So, yeah, I think it was a setup. I think it was time time for them to do something. It's been a few years since the Brock Lesnar years. We've already gone through a downtime. We've already gone through a couple of years with injury ravaging, and then the PED scandal at the beginning of this year, and the last year, John Jones fading and stuff like that. It was time for something to happen. I'm actually glad it was McGregor at this point and not Rousey.
I hate to say this, but I think I'm in that McGregor bandwagon right now. I'm rooting for the guy. I don't think he's as talented as everyone believes he is, but I'm certainly on that bandwagon.
Yeah, no, he deserves attention. I watch it very removed because I do still think they're going to be there are holes in his game, and I think Mendes, may have made a mistake in not trying to go for a submission or at least a scramble and playing it chest to chest to do, a longer fight. I think he's tough. I think he can take punishment. I think he's proven that. And I think that's to his advantage. He's big in that weight class. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does with Aldo once they finally do that. But now that with that said, watching all this mayhem and build up to this fight and all the stuff on the sidelines is Renan Barao, who's facing Dillashaw this weekend for the bantamweight title.
I'm excited about the fight, man. Like you had said earlier, we're not really sure what Dillashaw, what type of metal he is made of, and we're going to see it.
He's a guy. The UFC's wound up with a few guys like this as champions. Weidman, and
Weidman as well.
He's a guy without a lot of fights. So there are open questions. He fought probably the fight of the year in my book against Barao the first time out. It was one of those events. Now, this was my experience. It might not be yours. It was, that guy Dillashaw. Have you ever heard of him? No. Well, he won last night. He's a world champion now. He's what? Yeah.
It was just a complete who?
Yeah, it was. He was a little bit of, like I said, he didn't have a lot of fights. He leading up to it, he'd been in the UFC. He actually had a UFC loss. The fight before, he had a one-fight winning streak heading in there. So he lost Asuncion, and I don't know. Asuncion is a heck of a tough fighter. That was a split decision. Asuncion's been around a long time. I don't know that Asuncion's better than Barao, though. And Asuncion beat him, even though, like I said, it was a split decision. And I see Barao as a real chance this weekend. The rest of the card is kind of interesting, too, to me, because there's a lot of veterans, dude. You know what I mean? It's a lot of guys who've been around a long time. A lot of people who really need wins, you know what I mean? It's like either they got a couple losses in a row, or they're coming off a long layoff. And but definitely, from top to bottom, this is a card packed with a lot of veteran names. The co-main event is the ladies, and it features Jessica Ai against Miesha Tate. Tate's quietly won 3 fights in a row, and she's gonna, if she wins here, and she's favored to do so, she may very well put herself back in the Ronda Rousey picture. Good for her. Obviously, that's what you want to do, is always chase the championship when you're a professional fighter and stuff. But I'm not excited about seeing a third edition of Tate and Rousey. Jessica Ai, on the other hand, has never fought Rousey, obviously, and might be an interesting fight. She's got a 1-fight winning streak, and she took a loss in her UFC debut. It was a split decision to Alexis Davis. Before that, she had a win canceled against Sarah Kaufman, who's a very high-level person for smoking pot. But basically, Jessica Ai is 2-1 in the UFC if you discount the no contest for pot and give her the win. And what that does to me is, is she ready for a title shot with a win over Tate? Is Tate that number one contender where you take the spot from her, and then you got Ai? Ai versus Rousey would be, I put it this way, Ai is of equal skill in my book to like the Kaufmans, the Miesha Tates, Sarah McMahon, some of the people.
Fighting anybody on Rousey's level. Women's MMA is still developing.
Yeah, no, I found her. She's named Cyborg. That's a no-brainer. You only have to be Dana White to not let it happen because of your own ego. It's moronic. That was the fight that should have happened a long time ago.
I think she wrecked Cyborg.
It could very well happen, but in the build-up to the fight, she's the only person you can build up in a similar fashion to Rousey. Everybody else is walking in there against a monster. Jessica, she's going to be 3-1.
How is Cyborg going to pass the drug test?
She's passed them so far with Invicta.
She hasn't been doing this new UFC drug test, though.
I don't know that that's the case or not. I don't know what Invicta does, but the last fight was in Las Vegas.
Speculation on my end. I mean, that's
no. It's a good question. What does Invicta do with their drug testing? Are they part? They have some type of relationship with the UFC. Does the UFC include their fighters on their roster? Are they part of that? But regardless of that, Cyborg, we'll find out here soon if the tests are not back yet. But her last fight was in Las Vegas, so. The Nevada Commission will take care of drug testing for that. It was a title fight, so there'll certainly be, the most stringent drug testing Nevada can do.
That's going to be a fight that takes place on an Indian reservation.
We'll see. On a cruise ship.
Yeah, right. Cruise ship. It's a battleground.
But yeah, so with Tate and I, you've got the open question there that the winner of this fight. I think if I shuts out Tate fast. Maybe gets a first round win or something like that. She might make a case, and they might be able to do something with her and Rousey as other things develop. The rest of the card, I'm excited about the Joe Lauzon Takanori Gomi fight. Obviously, a couple veteran guys now. Both have tons of fights, and they're both kind of exciting fighters. So that one on paper, that could be fight of the night. You got Tom Lawler, the middleweight, coming back after a long.
Fun. Yeah, that guy's fun to watch. In fact, you know what? That's one of those weigh-ins you got to watch.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that gets putting on a show. He always did a good job of that. Sometimes better in his fighting, and
right.
and
he's
been coming in. He's coming in here after a long layoff. So. That's what you got there. You got Jim Miller facing Danny Castillo, another fight.
Jim Miller's one of those guys. I think. I don't know if he just kind of hit a wall, but I think, in my opinion, his name should be a little more known than it is. Like I think Jim Miller is a guy that should be top 3 in that weight class, consistently.
Well, I like Jim Miller, and overall he's 24-6, which is a hell of a good record. But his problem is right now he's got 2 losses in a row in the UFC. So anywhere you cut it, I don't
understand that. Like I said, maybe he's shot now. Maybe he hit that wall.
One of them is to Cerrone, and the other one is to Dariush, the Israeli kid that's been coming up. And I think he's still a serviceable fighter, but I don't know if top 3 is ever where he was going to wind up.
I honestly had that opinion. I had at one time.
He did beat Lauzon. He's come up short in fights with Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz. So he seems to have a ceiling there where he just doesn't break through. He's been with the UFC an awful long time, too. One of his early losses was to Gray Maynard. He's got a loss to Frankie Edgar on the regional scene up in the Jersey area.
Can you imagine being at that fight?
Yeah, in 2006, that must have been interesting. I like Miller. Miller's facing Castillo. Castillo's another one of those guys that, he's been around a long time. I like listening to Castillo talk about fights because the guy actually, talks theory pretty good. I enjoy it. Or at least I've heard a couple of conversations where he's come across as very clear-headed. He's also coming off 2 losses to up-and-coming guys. To Paul Felder, who's fighting on this card as well this weekend, and to Tony Ferguson. So now he gets another veteran, and we'll see if stop fighting the up-and-coming guys does him any good. Continuing to the undercard, you got Eddie Wineland. Eddie Wineland.
Cool guy. He's fought for me a couple times.
Yeah, me too.
The regional scene.
Me too. Coming up in the early days, he used to come out of Dunlin Valley Tudo, and he's facing Brian Caraway, who's an ATT guy. And I remember Brian used to always be at the fights as one of the training partners and one of the young guys with the team. And now he's a UFC fighter with a 19-7 record. So keep going down the list. You got Darren Cruikshank facing James Krause, another fight, guys with over 20 fights each. And overall, just a pretty good, strong card. Most of these fights are going to air on Fox, and I think the opening 4 fights are going to be on the UFC's Fight Pass, so you can go out and take a look at that. Anything else, Mike? What do you think of before we move on to talk a little Bellator and then circle around and want to talk about Fedor's potential return to MMA as well?
I think the UFC's hot again. I think it hit a lull, and I gotta tell you, I think their matchmaking is really stepping up, as well as that shortened cage has really increased the action, and I think we saw kind of like an ebb. There's always an ebb and flow with combat sports, and I think the UFC hit a lull, and the last 2 events that the UFC has kind of got a lot of water cooler talk happening. I think they're about to hit another peak sometime soon, so it's a good time to be in the sport again.
Okay, that's a positive thought. Now you've got the Reebok deal, you've got the PED.
Stitch Duran, you got the Stitch Duran situation.
Talk about that.
Well, Stitch Duran is a legendary cut man. I've had the fortunate opportunity to meet him on several occasions, and
he came over to UFC, but he's got years before that with he's a boxing guy. Exactly.
He's a boxing guy. I mean, he was. All right, let's go from the beginning. A lot of the times these UFC fights, once they were starting to kind of build up, and this is a subject that we've addressed in the past. There's a lot of camps out there that don't belong to be in the position they are because they don't have the wherewithal or knowledge to be where they're at. And the example I always give is when you're watching somebody in the corner and they're cornering a fighter in the UFC, and that fighter's sitting there with the mouthpiece in their mouth still in between the rounds, those people do not, they're so clueless on what they're doing and how to handle a fighter that they shouldn't be there. And that the fighter is there based on his overall athletic ability, not so much the camp that he's at. And what the UFC was experiencing was, because of this, was, there's elbows and knees. So a lot of times guys would get a cut, and cornermen did not have the overall ability to stop it. And to resolve that issue, the UFC hired cornermen to do it full time for the camps. Am I wrong on anything I've just said?
No, I'm with you so far, and I recall, this whole structure of things happens. Look, you get corners that are unprofessional. You do a few shows as a promoter, and you have no cuts, and then all of a sudden you have cuts, and you're like, what do we do? Elbow cuts can be very jagged, and I think the UFC found the best way to, in good faith, probably said, look, let's get professionals to be on standby here, and we'll pay for them just to make sure things happen. Because I remember an Eve Edwards fight where he was cut. I forget against who, and it was just a very unsatisfying ending. Because
I think Stephan Bonner. Not Stephan Bonner. I think who fought Stephan Bonner? Come on, in the Ultimate Fighter season 1, the end. Griffin.
Oh, Forrest Griffin.
Forrest Griffin. I think Forrest Griffin suffered from one as well. I think he had one of those fights where it's just they couldn't stop the bleeding.
Yeah, and the guy's sitting there like, let me go, I can fight. And he's lucid and he's fine. He's just bleeding from a jagged cut. So I can see where the UFC steps in, and in comes guys like Stitch Duran. There are a couple of pros around the show that are like that.
Now, to counter that, you and I had a podcast where I told you, I said, well, not to delve into the realm of conspiracy theories or anything like that, which some people really get sidetracked doing. You've got cut men that are company men now. They have no interest in the camp that they're representing. Their interest is putting on a good product for the UFC. Now you've got, who was Conor McGregor's last opponent prior to Mendez, the German guy?
Okay, Dennis Siver.
Dennis Siver. You got Dennis Siver versus Conor McGregor. Obviously, they knew McGregor is money. Siver's out there, they're fighting. He gets cut real bad in the first round. Comes out into the second round, and he's still bleeding. I believe I posed the question, wow, do you think maybe the cut men who are hired by the UFC that know Conor McGregor is kind of their moneymaker, do you think they said, well, maybe I don't put, the styptic pencil on some of these cuts?
Mm-hmm.
You can't sit here and argue it. You can't. Well, it doesn't look right. I believe that each of these camps should have their own cut men. It just kind of eliminates any issues or possibilities or probabilities from ever happening.
Okay. And was Stitch Duran the cut man in Germany?
One of them was. I mean, there's only like a couple of them. So whoever was the cut man certainly was hired by the UFC. It wasn't his own people.
But was he hired locally? Is he a German boxing person? I just don't know. But you brought up Stitch Duran.
The UFC cut man had their own cut man for that. I mean, it was like Stitch Duran or one of those people in the backstage. It wasn't like Sipper had his own cut man, but they had a UFC representative treating a cut on a guy
and failing
for their big money maker.
And failing to do that. Yeah, failing to administer the cut.
You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to administer the exact care I would for somebody that, the UFC doesn't have a vested interest in. Like, that would concern me. I mean, as somebody in the sport, I would worry about that. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And this is where I was going, because I brought up PEDs and you brought up this other controversy. You still got, I think it's this week here, the domestic violence issue came back up, and the UFC's
been rearing its head, and it's going to continue. I don't see that subject going away.
No
matter how many examples are made, unfortunately.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is it's one of those things that's being portrayed as like it's like like there's a higher instance of it among MMA people and stuff, but I really don't think that's a fair assessment. It's like saying, there's a really high instance of shoplifting among Walmart employees. All Walmart employees are, it's like you got good people who, are living their lives, with spouses and with kids and non-abusive, and are MMA fighters, and this puts a black eye on all of them when this John Koppenhauer situation.
Real sports documentary that's about to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of far-reaching. I think that's just for ratings. I mean, you could do that exact same thing with basketball. Excuse me. You can do the exact same thing with basketball, football.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, treat them all as individuals because, Koppenhauer or War Machine or whatever you want to call him, he's going to have to pay for some of the stuff he did, obviously. With some time.
He's a scary individual. Him and Mayhem Miller. There used to be a guy named Dan Howley that fought for Bodog, as you remember. He fell into that same category too. There's certain individuals that there's just such a disconnect. Like, they should not be learning anything in regards to combat sports or fighting because it makes them dangerous human beings.
Yeah, and that's where, like, the cookie cutter gym. Hey, if you got the fee to pay, people ask very little questions nowadays. And it is an interesting thing, but here's my point though. Now this subject has come back up with the domestic violence. Anthony Johnson's name came back up recently and stuff. You've got this week, a couple of days ago, was John Jones's birthday. No one remembers. Have we talked about John Jones at all in the last few months? Very little. Yeah. John Jones is completely forgotten. You got Nick Diaz, who's been sentenced to jail for a DUI. A big 2 days, but, the UFC this year on a public relations situation has popped up in the major news negatively all over the place, and they've done a really good thing, and that's they've shut up. They really have not gone out and tried to defend themselves or, tried to do anything. They're not addressing those issues, and that's probably the right way to go about it. But
I agree.
What's going on with John Jones? I mean, John Jones...
Well, the little I've read is just, the camp is certainly trying to portray him as being more humble. He's sweeping the mats, mopping the mats. I have a couple contacts over there. I haven't really shaken those trees in order to kind of better assess the situation. I just hope he doesn't go the Sonny Liston route. I hope he's got a wake-up call. He's got a good family structure. And then I sincerely hope he leans on them in order to try to get whatever is bothering him. I hope he can kind of figure it out.
I agree. It was his birth, but here's the part: I haven't heard much either. And the last time I spoke to people from some of those camps out there, I was just told, don't ask me about John Jones, especially on the podcast and stuff. So. it's still one of those things where it's a public relations nightmare that the UFC has been dodging, and I think that's one of the reasons that things like McGregor and things like that have gotten a lot of news on the positive side for him, is because they've sort of concentrated on that, and they've had a hyper schedule this year. They just did 4 shows in about 8 days, a little bit here in July, so they've been on a heck of a schedule, and they're just, like you said, they're maybe on an upswing and trying to do the right thing. But some of these PR things, are made to make you look bad. So it's just interesting how they've been dealing with it and working with it differently.
Well, Neil, not to regress, but what is your opinion of this Duran situation? Essentially, he spoke up about the Reebok deal, stating, "Well, I was picked as a representative to speak up for the cut men. We're losing on sponsorship because we're not getting paid anymore." Because we would get a little bit of money from Tap Out and the other brands in order to, represent them, and we were told that there's no other money in the kitty for us. I think his mistake was going public with it. He should have just quit and then did it. If he was that upset about it, he said, "Hey, you know what? He should have just resigned from the UFC rather than allowing them to fire him, if it meant that much to him." But, it's interesting. It's interesting. What's your opinion of it?
It's hard. Because the UFC at some point has to feel like everybody's got, and as a promoter, I'm sure you felt it, and as a matchmaker,
everyone's got their hand
I felt it. Everybody's got their hand out, and you're getting nickeled and dimed to death. And, yeah, sure, the cornermen, the cut men, maybe they got used to getting a couple of bucks from, some of the smaller sponsors or some of the old people under the old sponsorship deals. And that happens, you know what I mean? But that's the same thing that's been happening in fighting for years. Where, like, for example, retired older boxers who no longer have a lot of money and who are on their, on a downslide and stuff, many of them have gone back and been given, let's say cushy jobs. Or easy jobs, like, hey, work in the gym, train fighters, clean the gym up and stuff, and they get them a little money. They take care of them, you know what I mean? There's a lot of stories of them, where the boxers in their heyday may have had some fame, you know what I mean? And there's stories of, like, Frank Sinatra visiting, I think it was Bo Jack, who was a world champion in the 40s and in that era and stuff, but there's stories of Sinatra visiting him at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. And he had a job there where he shined shoes and did things like that, but people took care of him. You see what I mean? And I think that there's a lot of that mentality in the combat sports of, like, and the cut men probably get little money, and
they are overlooked. They are, when you need them, you really need them.
Yeah, because I'll tell you this, because MMA, when MMA started in the modern era, in the 90s, the cut man wasn't, the camps came, they had a corner man. The corner man was usually their friends and training partners and stuff. Maybe some of them had, an older martial artist or something like that who kind of supervised and stuff. But the thought of, having a nutritionist, a weight instructor, a cut man accompanying you, and the idea of a team structure and stuff like that, sparring partners and things, that didn't exist. It didn't come about. It had to develop. Now, this is how I look at it, because you have to look at you can't look at the history of MMA even since '93 and not tie it intimately into the history of boxing. Things happen faster.
Which made me excel as a promoter, I might add, because I came from a boxing background. First and foremost, I'm a boxing guy. Secondly, I'm a huge MMA fan.
Here's the thing: is so the histories are intimately tied. They're identical almost, except for the MMA has grown faster, and I blame modern times on that. You know what I mean? But the development of rules took a certain period of time in boxing. There were issues with legality and the commissions, and then the commissions stepped in, and the same exact things happened in MMA. So you can't look at it. So when you look at the history of boxing, and you look at the reverence they have for the truly good cut men, you know what I mean? They know.
Go ahead.
And the truly good cutmen, the cutmen that have earned their dues, saved fights, had a fighter come up to him and thank him after the fight and stuff like that. Those guys
have outsmarted the commission in regards to how they stop the cuts.
And
that's not easy.
I understand, but here's the point: is through the experience of boxing, you learn that this is a specialty that's stuck. You know what I mean? These aren't charlatans, not the good ones. These aren't charlatans who are there trying to make a buck, and it's like, hey, I'll stitch you up, or we'll do this and come in, and then they don't know what the hell they're doing. There is a specialty there. There is a touch there that the really good ones are respected. So that comes to us from boxing. So there was obviously going to be a need for it in MMA, and I don't think that the cutmen had the time to develop the way they did in boxing yet, So now what happens is you got this crossover thing, and now these guys are making money. Maybe, I'm not sure how they make their money. The trainer or the coach maybe pays them, or the corner pays them, or the fighter pays them to be in their corner in boxing.
It's a fee.
And now they're maybe making a little bit more money, a little bit extra money in this new sport. That's very well and good, you know what I mean? But when did that become mandatory? When did the Cutman sponsor become mandatory? That these guys, sorry, the sponsorship went away. Just like many income streams go away for people throughout lives and things like that. And it's bad that you had to take a hit in your pocket, but in the overall scheme of the sport, it makes sense. Maybe you shouldn't have been getting on top of your fee, on top of what you get for doing your job. On top of what you get from doing your job, you're privileged to get $300 or $400 to wear a shirt, or I don't even know how much money it is, but whatever it is, hey, that went away. The sponsorship died. Tap Out went out of business. Nobody gets a Tap Out check anymore if they go out of business. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't know at what point you draw the line. I find cutmen to be extremely important, or practically you can't really do fights in the modern time without a professional cutman attending. Is the structure that the UFC uses messed up? Yeah, because it takes control away from the corner and it gives control to the promoter, and that's always been their game, and that's always been what part of what their problem is. So yeah, I don't know all the things about the Stitch Duran situation or how much money he was getting. I do know he's got a privileged place among cutmen in boxing. There's a lot of guys out there, Jerry Boyd and
how many? Well, here we go. Like, how many events, coming into this, do you think Stitch Duran worked for free or on his own dime in order to get where he's at?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the miles he put on his car, and the countless hours he spent away from his family in order to even put himself in a position that he's in today speaks volumes of his love for combat sports. First and foremost, you have to say that. I'll tell you this right now. Sometimes the commissions turn a blind eye on things when they know they're left of center, and they're not meeting these standards that are put forth, by a general consensus that people are supposed to follow. And one of the blind eyes they consistently turn their eye on are these cutmen. The use of styptic pencil or iron in water, like in water bottles and stuff, or asthma medication inside water bottles. Those things are frowned upon. Not frowned upon. Those are illegal. If you've ever cut yourself on top of your head, you know the difficulty it is to close that wound up.
Mm-hmm.
And for these guys to just, have a huge chunk of flesh, messed up on their skull, and in under a minute, not only is that thing closed, but it's possible that you're going to go another 5 minutes while having it pounded on without blood coming out of it. If you don't think there's a little left of center things happening in those instances, you're out of your mind.
No,
out of your mind.
I agree. Like I said, it's a specialty.
Part of being absolutely part of the specialty is I'm risking public embarrassment by getting caught, and two, I'm slicker than the commission. You got these undertrained, people that are paid to watch me, and I'm better than they are at their own jobs.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They have no idea.
Okay, there's a price. And I know this kind of seems like, one of these handshake deals that, are done in a back alley. But services like that do require a fee and a price, and they are very valuable. Kind of like when, like we were talking to Jose Aldo, drug test down in Brazil. What his manager did down there with subterfuge and creating fires in other areas in order to get him, not suspended or held accountable for exactly what it is they did, and got the real drug test, quote unquote, in front of their own doctor. Dude, that he did an amazing job. Like that manager is worth every single penny you're paying him because you just got away with cheating.
Yep.
And the Cutmen fall into that category.
No, I look, and I think it does come down to something you touched on there. And in Nevada, you're less susceptible to this. But even in Nevada, I bet I saw Adelaide Bird. Do you know who Adelaide Bird is?
I know the name.
Okay, Adelaide Bird is a boxing judge, a pretty prolific boxing judge.
Okay.
Commonly in boxing circles, considered one of the poorer judges.
Are you talking about the female?
Yeah.
She's not doing MMA.
Yes, exactly. There's my point.
Horrible. I know exactly who she is.
Yeah, no, there's my point. I was, I talk to hardcore boxing people all the time, and the talk of how off she is and how bad she can be in terms of judging and stuff in boxing is very prevalent. And there are situations where certain boxers prefer that she not do their events. You know what I mean?
She shouldn't even be allowed to watch it on TV, according to some people.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for her to cross over to MMA, all you're talking about there is a boxing commission moving someone's name on a list and just belittling what a judge actually does. Because to say, oh no, she's a judge in boxing, just move her over there, she'll be a judge over there.
Yeah,
is deranged because
don't Google search her. She's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? Yeah, no. So how do things like that? And so there's a perfect example in Adelaide Bird. Here we've got a situation where even in Nevada, and imagine how this translates into smaller states, who don't have full-time employees on the boxing commission, who got people doing it as a part-time job, basically because they love the sport, and now. There's been a real shakeup in the boxing commissions and the commission structures brought along by MMA, because now you had boxing people who kind of were in there who get invaded by another sport they don't understand, and you get all kinds of defensive nature. You get all kinds of people trying to keep their sinecure positions.
Contests are common, absolutely.
So that's caused a lot of problems. And even in boxing, just boxing, you had people who were not qualified doing jobs. You know what I mean? It's like, I remember one time I was matchmaking a show in Russia, and this was a very difficult situation because I'm doing my walk-arounds, and we had inspectors, and we had,
You hired me to help you with one of those shows.
I don't know. I don't think this was the one that you were at.
It's your example.
But no. But so I walk into the Russian locker room, and I can smell Tiger Balm. These fucking guys are putting, a tie liniment, basically something that burns, on their legs and thighs.
I think we had this issue in Costa Rica as well. I was down there inspecting as well, on top of Russia. Yes, I'm aware of that.
But you could smell the tie liniment, But what the hell? The inspector who was in there, who was a Russian person that had been hired by the promotion to do that, and who was doing, an ethical job as far as they knew, they didn't realize what that, if somebody is taken to the ground and the opponent is applying the guard, and they wrap their legs around you, and they have Tiger Balm on their thighs, you're going to get Tiger Balm on your chest, and you're going to get a burning sensation across your body in the middle of the fight, whereas the other fighter's already acclimated to it. So it's. I don't even need to explain the illegality of this thing, but the guy didn't realize what the smell was. So the unqualified person allows all kinds of shenanigans in MMA, in boxing, and in all this stuff. And until that's addressed and you really have qualified people doing it, there's absolutely no way that you're going to avoid these situations. Here's where Stitch Duran, it's kind of like a grandfathering, or like he probably did. What the UFC probably gives him a pretty good fee. When the UFC, I don't see the UFC going, hey, here's $30 to be the corner man. They probably said
a couple grand a night.
Yeah, they probably sat him down and said, here's some money. He's probably doing okay. Now for him to turn, and he probably did a lot of fights over the last 20 years for the aforementioned $30 and a lot less probably. So now here he's already got his fee. He was making, let's just say, $300-400 from some T-shirt company. Maybe more, maybe less, but the point is this whole thing is like a grandfather. Like, we're paying for his history and for his resume and stuff. It's like,
They paid him enough to steal him from boxing. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, so, he still corners in boxing. He recently cornered Chiquito Vasquez for us.
Okay, but whenever there's a boxing event in the UFC on the same night, where's he at?
Yeah, no. Obviously, yeah, you're right. So
they stole him from boxing, essentially.
And here's the thing is, now they got a guy who's an expert, and he's been dealing with the commission. In the commission, you're a new commissioner, and someone goes, oh, no, that's Stitch Duran, man. That guy's been around for 40 years. You hear?
The rules that apply to Stitch Duran are not the same rules that apply to you and I.
Yeah, if I walk in and I'm the cut man, nobody's going to do, then it's so the whole thing is a game of the commissions are what needs to go, really. There needs to be either a national board or some type of something, but the individual commissions are the wrecking of all the combat sports. You know what I mean?
Now speaking of commission, and you know what, Miguel, you're right. Now, let's talk about examples where commissions are absolutely needed. Are you familiar with what's going on with Wes Sims right now?
No, tell me what's going on with Wes. UFC veteran Wes Sims.
First and foremost, Wes is a very, very good friend of mine. I love Wes Sims. And it goes beyond the fight game. One, he's a student of the sport. If you can say, oh, he's an idiot, he's a lunk, he's like a 7-foot clown, blah, blah, blah. You can say all those nasty, mean things you want about him. The knowledge that he has in regards to the sport is incredible.
It's funny, Mike. I talk to Wes a lot, and he actually thinks very poorly of you.
I would expect that as your response. So Wes has a show in 2002, 2003, right when the commission was starting, and they're at his event and stuff like that. And Wes is kind of like a Strasser type, someone that screw the commission, they're going to ruin it, to a certain degree. These people certainly have merited opinions.
No, I'll put it this way. When the commissions came in, there are two types of promoters. You can lump them in all the way, and this is going to be the case forever and ever. There are promoters who could run a legitimate and good show without a commission, and then there are others who need to be prevented from running a show by a commission because they'll never run a good show.
Okay, now I will let you decide based on this example where Wes falls. This is great. So Wes has got a female, working out at a local gym, sells a ton of tickets. She's not at a usual weight class that you would find a lot of women at. She's kind of a heavier weight class.
She's a heavyweight. I think I know where you're getting with this.
Okay.
And by heavyweight, even though she's a 200-pound plus heavyweight, which like in boxing, Lamonakis, it occurs, and some of them are very athletic. So just go on. She's a heavyweight. Go ahead.
So she's a heavyweight.
This gets good, folks. Listen up.
It is. And take some notes, future promoters. So, and so they cannot find her an opponent. Now, I have been in this position and have done things that I might not necessarily have been proud of. However, I have never stooped to this level. So what Wes does is, you're a savvy person, you're crafty, you've got to fill a spot, you got ticket sales, you've got a woman that's looking at you going, I just want to fight. You tell me I could, get a fight in. Yeah, okay, I got you.
It's a payday,
so
right?
he reaches into the pro wrestling world and gets a pro wrestler known as Super Oprah. Now, Super Oprah, you think, oh, it's like a heavy set, black woman, imitating Oprah from TV. Well, that's not the case in this instance. It's actually a black man imitating a woman on TV. And Super Oprah went in there with like a bra on, everything, and played a woman and did a work fight.
And all under the auspices of the Ohio State?
Yeah, of the commission. It's just like, well, did he pass his pregnancy test? What? Apparently he did. And
well, clearly he wasn't pregnant. Right? So if they did the eye test on that one. No, he's fine.
Yeah. And he went in there and, essentially did a work fight. And, there's video of it that is absolutely brilliant. And, when he got kicked in the stomach, the whole crowd went crazy.
No, I mean
those people left, they're really entertained. Now,
here's the thing is you could say what you want about Wes and the real promoter may just cancel the fight and stuff like that, but here's the thing is the boxing commission is supposedly there to prevent exactly something like that happening.
Can you imagine the boxing commission? I mean, Miguel, obviously we've both been in this position many times where they come at you with bad news. Can you imagine the news that they receive to you is that it's not a woman, it's actually a man, and then you'd have to hide your laughter and act surprised? What do you mean it's a man? Coleman just, you got to either make up some story.
Yeah, no.
That's been, having relations with the person, and there's no way it's a man.
But here's the thing is okay, you could introduce her to the fight as Super Oprah, but let's pause for a minute and go through this process here, because this is how farcical it can get. You know what I mean? Because this is a bad example. Most commissions wouldn't get this far, and it's this simple. She needed to apply for a license to fight. Means paperwork, means showing ID. What happened in that process? Where was that? The boxing commission took a fee to give a license.
Example of how inept certain commissions are.
If everything was operating there as a commission would, the boxing commission there took a fee from Super Oprah to license her to let her do that work fight, or let him do that work fight. So yeah, here you've got a crazy example from deep in the history of MMA, but
very important example.
You've got the recent activity of Adelaide Byrd. Just all of a sudden, she's now an MMA judge, which I find, as a person who's judged a lot of MMA fights, I've also actually judged boxing fights, but I've received a lot of instruction and training in doing that, and I don't know, and in terms of MMA, I've been around more live MMA than almost anybody in the world.
Now let me ask you being on the promoter side in regards to people like Adelaide Byrd. Now, is it your opinion that people like Adelaide Byrd are friends with some of the promotions, or they know people that know her, so if they have an agenda, they can say, well, if we have Adelaide Byrd, we can push our agenda. So do you think it's the actual promotion going, yeah, would you mind assigning her to this event, and the commission acquiescing? Or do you believe it's the commission not being, you think it's just them being inept and not understanding that she's a complete and total joke, and every event she's at, there's some sort of controversy involving her? Which is it?
Look, in her particular case, I would need to know a lot more details to be particularly sure. But I do know that I believe she has what I would term a sinecure job with the boxing commission.
You think she's just politically connected?
Yeah, I know her husband was heavily involved and respected with boxing. And she became, so it's like you marry a boxer, you become a boxing judge. And that's really how it came about, and that's where you get into, a person with presence, a person that people react to and stuff. It's like, sure, and now she's an established member of the commission. I think she comes with the commission. I don't know the promoters asked for her or not, but I do think that there's a process to choosing those guys. So she's been around a long time, so she's not going to work, amateur fights for, gas money, at a local gym. She's at the point now where she gets the bigger fights and stuff like that. And I don't know that she's ever, paid the full dues because she's somebody who came from boxing's, infrastructure. I think she got that job because of who she know.
Yeah. Nepotism, I think is the word you're looking for.
That's a big part of it in certain terms. But I think you got to analyze every example there. There's some people that are there for those reasons. There's some people that are there trying to do a good job. There's some people that are there that are not qualified. You know what I mean? And in terms of some of the commissions, bare bones, the commissions usually operate this way, even in the big states. They have a few employees, and then they have a whole slew of people that show up on the day of the show for pocket money, tip money, not big money, but they are part of the show and they get in. They get in, so it's a good, I'm a fight fan, but the tickets are getting kind of expensive. Maybe, I could get in the commission, be an assistant commissioner, and you get to see the fights.
Yeah, you're right.
There's so much of that. So many of those side, commissioners, the guys that watch you in the locker rooms and stuff that are not full-time employees. Those are the guys that come up to you, hey, you think I could get a couple extra tickets and this, that, and you kind of you're like, wow, they're commissioners. They're not commissioners. They're part-time employees that are there for the same reason. They're trying to see the fights. You know what I mean? That's in general what goes on. But you do have to, I think, look at each individual and stuff. But what you've got here is a mess, and it's based around the commission system, the ABC commission system. And, they'll all react. You want to see these guys react in unison, threaten them, and then they will all be like, whoa, we're necessary, we're this. Go out right now on the internet to the 50 states, and you just tell me how many of them even have results on their websites for fights and a calendar. You're at about half of them. Half of these commissions don't do anything. And every time you look at a result, you got a monkey putting stuff in Excel on, one website in one state, and then the Excel form is in a different format in another state because the other guy, they don't talk at all, they don't communicate. There's no, you all use different forms. You could go to one state and they chose Word. They like to use Word or Word Perfect or who knows what else, what other crap. But there's no uniformity, there's no communication. This last weekend, and I just to not look back because the commissioners worked with us in Rhode Island, I think they made a good call. But what happened is we had a fighter on late notice fighting in Rhode Island in a boxing event. Okay. And he had fought in October in Massachusetts. So we called over to Massachusetts to get the medical test sent over. And they sent the medical test over, but lo and behold, in Massachusetts, this kid sprained an ankle. So he had a 60-day suspension. And
he's got to go see a doctor to get cleared.
And he's got to go see a doctor to get cleared. So Massachusetts is sitting there saying he's suspended, and Rhode Island saying, well, we have to honor the suspension until they lift the suspension. Well, lo and behold, this kid also fought in Louisiana in June of 2015. Where was that communication with Massachusetts in the suspension? Because he fought.
They did their due diligence. You know what? They're not even checking medicals in that state.
So
that's all it tells me. They don't even care.
Yeah, and so, Rhode Island at least cared.
All you gotta do is look the guy up and there's a big red flag by his name.
Rhode Island worked with us in terms of they helped us attempt to contact the Louisiana State Commission. We were unable to contact them over 2 days. Like I said, we're trying to arrange the fight on short notice. And the Rhode Island Commission decided to honor the pre-fight medical exam rather than force him to go to an orthopedist. It's a sprained ankle from 9 months ago. You know what I mean? So there is a point where a savvy commission that is comfortable in their skin and doing their job, they can make little calls like that, and it's okay.
Honestly, if he's fought in between a suspension, you just have to assume it's been lifted, and that the place that put the suspension on him has not done their due diligence. And if they're not returning phone calls, that is a telltale sign of them not doing their job.
Yeah. So look, we are going to wrap it up here. We started on the state of MMA, and now we're on the state of boxing commissions and all the regulation. I think we've got.
It's all cyclical.
Yeah, I think we've got cause to do another podcast in a week or so and touch back on this subject because it's actually just so rich in material. But
Miguel, do you was kind of really, by no stretch of the imagination, am I a member of the press, or should even bear that title? But the topics that we discuss on this podcast are so incredibly relevant and ignored by mainstream media. It just tells you that one, they've never laced up their shoes and got in a boxing ring, or had that cage door closed behind them, or even had any part in putting an event together. Because for them to ignore the topics that you and I are talking about, just tells me that they're part of the problem.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think that the mainstream media, go back to what Zuffa and the UFC did, since we've been talking about this, in the very first Zuffa UFC. Now, this is, Meyerowitz has sold the UFC. The UFC has been purchased by a new company. They're in New Jersey for their event. New Jersey, the Boxing Commission is regulating the event. And the press people from all the small websites that have been supporting them for years, and homemade newspapers like Full Contact Fighter and stuff like that, that were the were the bloodline of the sport for the early years, all showed up and they all had trouble getting in. And some of the bigger ones got in, and
some people blame Loretta Hunt for that.
And yeah, see, there's
let's put a name to it.
There was some picking and choosing going on with some of that stuff, and there's an upgrade to, hey, these guys have a website that has 10,000 hits a week, to, hey, we're not going to give you a press pass because the guy from Yahoo is going to sit in your seat.
Yeah, who doesn't know shit about the sport?
Of course, but there's the problem was that all of a sudden, the sport gets big and Yahoo says, hey, who's the news? And they hire people who come from other sports. It's like basketball writers, ESPN and CNN, those sports sites. The MMA writing and writers that they have are a complete joke. They're a complete joke. They do nothing incisive at all. And what happens is possibly the UFC could take away their pass. So they can't get into the fights, they can't get into events, and again, they become almost like employees, because they show up, they see the fights, hey, it's the same media guys, and the same joke, and the same this.
I said in these media scrums where I was the only guy asking questions, and it wasn't like, the obnoxious, I need another question. It was pause, wait 30 seconds, the guy's standing there going, anyone? Okay, here's another question for you, like in the IFL days. And, that actually introduced me to the owners of the IFL, and they hired me to do, radio broadcasts for them, because I was the only one in one of their events that actually had an idea of what to ask him what was happening.
Yeah, no, it's still in its nascent stages, these sports developing, and the people in charge of it have their own interests in mind. They don't have the actual development of the sport in mind. And that's part of where these conflicts are popping up, It's hard to tell a commissioner who's been there 15 years and making $100,000 a year that thinks, he's been an institution in boxing and stuff, that he's not relevant anymore and we don't need him.
That's a tough conversation to have.
50 times. Right?
Right.
So,
excellent. Well, Miguel, it's always a pleasure. I love doing these with you, obviously.
Yeah, no, we're having a good time talking about the state of MMA. We are going to sign off. We've gone long here, but obviously the state of MMA.
We've got more to talk about, which is crazy.
There's tons more to talk about. So we will catch up with you. It's Miguel Durrani. This has been the Talk and Shoot podcast, and Miguel and Mike have been Talk and Shoot.